work with the community on this particular session. Let's move on to the next slide. Give me 1 second here. Okay, my agenda for today is pretty simple. I'm just going to do a quick intro. We'll talk about the Power Platform DevOps prereqs. We'll look into a sample app and a workflow setup, and then we'll dive into the DevOps procedures. So DevOps procedures are going to be pretty straightforward. We're going to actually create a repository for our solution. We're going to actually move the code from that solution into the repository. And then we'll see how we can transition code from dev to QA, and from QA perhaps to a production environment, all inside the context of a Power Platform. So I hope this is a bit of what you were expecting to see today. There's a lot more. This continues to evolve on a daily basis. So just last week, I believe, or a couple of weeks ago, there was a release of the GitHub entries where you can actually now see Power Platform code. So you can see your Power Apps source code inside of GitHub. So that's topic for another discussion. There's plenty more, but mostly from a corporate standpoint, most customers will probably be on Azure DevOps anyways. So here's my intro, very short. My name is Mariano Gomez. I've been a Microsoft MVP since 2008. I'm currently the Chief Technology Officer here at McCormick, so pretty much in charge of our technology strategy, and that includes Power Platform. We're very Power Platform heavy here at the company and do a lot with Dynamics 365. We actually have a commercial Power Platform product. So yes, this can be actually done commercially as well. And certainly when you're doing commercial products, you better have a DevOps strategy for it. The other thing is I'm from San Andres Island, small place in Colombia in South America, and I currently live in Roswell, Georgia in the United States. You can find me just about everywhere. I'm on YouTube, on Twitter. There's my email as well. Feel free to reach out to me as at your earliest convenience, or if you have any questions. Now, this is all the slideshow I have because my stuff is live. Obviously today I can't go live, but I have a recording that I want to bring to you guys. But it's just as if I were live because that's just about the session I was using to practice for this presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to start this, and I'm going to play the recording. So let me know if the sound is coming through and if everything is going well.
We can vaguely make out some sound, Mariano. It's not very audible, the sound.
Hold on. So let me know if you can also turn up your speakers on your side. That would help a lot, or your audio sound. That would help a lot as well. And I apologize for this. Is that better?
It's actually not very audible, Mariano.
Can I make a suggestion, Mariano?
Sure.
Are you running this on your machine and then using that sound, or you're directly transferring this sound?
I'm running it on my machine and using that sound.
And where is your microphone? Is it connected to your headset?
Yes. Actually, I can switch microphones too if that's necessary.
Yes, either you can do that, or if you drop your headset near your speaker, that may also help to increase the volume.
Sure. Give me 1 second here. Let me actually change strategy here for a second. Sorry for this, guys. It's been a rough day trying to get people on the phone to troubleshoot this stuff.
Look, we're just happy to have you, Mariano. We're just happy to 13-time MVP, guys. This guy is a legend. So look, we're just happy to have you, to be able to see you today. And yes, we're going to work through this together. So we've got Prashant, we've got all these guys. So it's exciting, really.
Tell you what, Mariano's the real deal, man. It's Victor here.
Oh, Victor, look, we got Victor online as well.
What was that?
No stress, Mariano. We're here for you. We're listening.
All right, let's try this. Let's see if this will work. Is that better?
That one, I don't hear anything at all, Mariano.
Okay, let's see how we do this.
So Mariano, somebody made a suggestion. When you join the meeting, if you get out and join again, you can set up your audio on the computer to be part of the meeting. So it could be synced directly.
I actually switched the audio to the PC.
Okay.
And so is the microphone, but I'm not entirely sure what else I need to do here.
It's a configuration when you join the meeting, so you might have to go out and come back in.
Okay.
If you want audio to come through the meeting, so.
All right, let me try that.
Okay.
Okay, I'm back.
Okay, let's give it a go.
Is that better?
It's still not audible, Mariano, but we also, this is only day 2 of the boot camp, right? So we've still got day 3 tomorrow. So yeah, we've got a couple of options, Mariano. I mean, because obviously there are technical challenges here. So what we could potentially do is work on it, and then we could maybe this time tomorrow, or a bit earlier, possibly, maybe a couple of hours earlier tomorrow. We could also try it again, possibly.
And,
okay.
And Mariano, if you know it by heart, you might be able to let the video play as a visual for us, and then use voiceover live.
Okay, I can probably do that. Yeah, that's probably a better option. Let's try that. And for that, I'm gonna actually switch to my mic here. Mute this.
We hear you really well. You just mute the video, and I think we'll be good.
All right. So let's try and go over this in this fashion. And what I'm gonna do then is I'm gonna try and focus the best we can in getting this through and communicate the content as is. So bear with me and let's do this. So the first thing is, if we go to adminpowerplatform.microsoft.com, you will want to actually start with a few environments. That's kind of how typically you set up your environment. So what I'm going to do here is, if I click on new environments, we will want to enter an environment name. And in this particular case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the ALM dev, and that's going to be my development environment. I'm going to set it up as a production environment, and I'm going to create a Dataverse entry for it. So that Dataverse entry is going to allow me to then store any entities or any application objects that are going to be a part of my project. The next thing here is when you set up your environment, you gotta define a URL for it. That's especially true if you're using Dataverse. And then you define all the other things related to your particular settings, like your currency. For now, I'm not gonna deploy any sample apps, but I'm just gonna go ahead and hit save here. And once I hit save, that particular environment gets created for me. So we're gonna wait a couple seconds until that happens. And as you can see, right now it's actually preparing an instance. While that happens, I'm gonna go ahead and set up a new QA environment. Again, I'm gonna set up that as a production environment and set that database up for that environment. And I'm gonna repeat the same for our production environment. Now, keep in mind one thing about environments. There was a time in our history where you were actually told that environments were permanent. That's not true anymore. Environments tend to be volatile, especially those that are QA type environments or test environments or staging environments, whatever you want to call it. And certainly you can refresh your dev environment as much as you want. So don't think that environments need to be this permanent object that you need to work with all the time. So, there is a transient nature, if you want to call it somehow, to environments. And that's kind of the message I want to bring here for now. So we're going to create a final production environment. That's going to be where we're going to be right now. And now we have 3 environments that we're working with. We have, and this is probably true for every single business where you have some sort of ALM process in place. Okay, so the next thing here is if I go to my DevOps environment, I can set up a 30-day trial if you want. And that's actually something that if you go to visualstudio.com is something that's available to you. But the next thing I'm going to do then is I'm going to review some of the permissions here, or actually browse the market extension place. And the first thing that you need to do when you set up your DevOps environment is actually locate the Power Platform build tools. Those Power Platform build tools are especially the ones that are going to allow you to do your ALM operation. So I'm going to just select that here. The good thing is it's free, so you don't need to pay anything for it. And once you get that installed, you're ready to pretty much go in your overall DevOps tenant in order to select where you want to install it. If you have several organizations, go ahead and select the proper one. But right now, that's my McCormick one. And once I'm done, I'm going to proceed to the organization. As you saw, the installation is pretty quick. It gives you pretty much all the tasks that you need in your process. Now, I'm going to set up a project here, and I'm going to call this ALM Power Apps. You can put a description to it. I'm certainly going to make this initially a private project. But as you can see up to there, you're not doing anything different from the stuff you've done previously for any other type of project, whether it's a .NET project or a web project. The only thing here is I'm going to make sure that it's a Git for Git type version control. And I'm going to go ahead and click Create to proceed. Now, back here in Power Platform, while everything gets set up, what I'm going to do then with my environments is I'm going to just go ahead and choose my dev environment. And what I'm going to do then is go to Power Apps and make sure that I am in the proper environment to begin with. Okay. So we also want to make sure that we set up a solution for these environments. So the core aspect of developing in Power Apps or Power Platform in general is to make sure that your solutions are actually driving your development initiatives. There was a time where you could get away with basically creating individual apps, individual flows, etc. But that's no longer recommended. if you're actually going to implement a DevOps strategy, you got to work with a solution and got to work in the context of a solution. Okay, so I want to make sure that that's pretty clear. So you're going to click here on solutions, and you're going to click on new solution. And the next thing you're going to do is you're going to enter the display name for your solution. So I'm just going to call this ALM solution, but keep in mind that the preferred method here is to set up a new publisher. Now, you can use the standard default CDS publisher. You can use any of the default ones that are there. But if you are doing serious commercial development, you will want to have your own publisher, because that's going to allow you to set up the prefixes for your entities. It's going to allow you to set up all the different components that identify that particular solution as developed by your company. So you have the ability to enter like a support email address if you want. You have the ability to define some addresses. So as soon as the screen loads, we'll see that you can enter a display name for the solution. And why not? I'm just going to go ahead and enter Mariano's Power Platform or Power Apps Factory. That's going to be the name of my solution for now, of my publisher. I can define anything here. The prefix that defines basically a entry for every entity and every defined name for your objects. So all your objects get prefixed with this solution prefix. Important as well, enter contact information for your product, where particularly users can get support, etc. So there is an option value prefix. I honestly never change that, but if you want to go ahead and change that value, that's up to you. But it gives you sort of like a starting point for your option sets. Now, as I mentioned before, go ahead and fill out all the demographic information for your address, or all the address properties. And finally, you can also go ahead and set that up in a way that it can register in the solution market profile. So when you're developing for app source, or you want to publish in app source, you have some sort of reference for that. So I'm just going to hit here, save and close, and click done here to continue. Now, I can choose the one that I just created, and I can start now a versioning number for my solution. You can define a configuration page. You can define some additional description if you want. You know, the initial package type, that's important to keep in mind. It's always an unmanaged package. And, you know, we can enter into what's unmanaged and managed, but at the end of the day, you have your solution created for you, and we can move from there. Okay, so once you're done, the next step is making sure that you pretty much have, you know, note that your environment is already set up. You already have all your 3 different environments that you configured. And then what I'm gonna do then is go back over to my projects in a second, making sure that that's all configured. All right, so now that I have my dev environment, I can go ahead and do anything in this particular environment. You can start setting up your applications. You can start setting up your flows. But in order to move forward, I'm just gonna go and select the expense application. So now that I've created my solution, now that I've created my environment, I'm just gonna go ahead and do my traditional development. So since I'm not going to start from scratch, what I'm going to do is use the template expense application. I'm going to go ahead and hit create here, and that's going to set up or provision that application for me. I would probably have to hydrate my my SharePoint connection for that application, and that's going to happen for me automatically. I'm just going to have to authorize it. So I'm going to click on the allow button here. And that's going to set up the rest of the Power Apps application for me. Okay, so we're going to click through all this stuff, skip, and close that window. So here's a workable application that you can either create from a template or you will develop from scratch, but that's in terms of your application. Okay, the other thing is you can go and review your data sources, make sure everything is incorporated. You can then go back and sort of, look at all the actions. If these applications have flows associated to them, you can check for that to make sure that everything is within what you're looking for. Okay. So I can go ahead then and test this application, make sure everything is working. We see that it's, it's our traditional expense application. It's, I can scroll through or click on different aspects of that application. And when I'm done, I feel satisfied with that. That's good to go. It's something that we can definitely go ahead and save. So I'm just gonna save that application. All right, and once you're done, you can either publish it or do whatever you want. But at that point, we're ready to process or go through our DevOps operation with that app. Okay. All right. Now, keep in mind that Power Apps particularly has a version control feature in it, but since we don't have that available for our flows, it's pretty much what I would call a primitive version of DevOps. All right. The next thing that we want to do is we want to add that application and any flow that we have to our solution. So in that case, all I had to do is go through solutions, click or select the ALM solution that I have, and now I'm adding that expense application to the solution. Now, keep in mind that there are some restrictions as to what type of objects you can add to a solution, especially if those are already created. So you cannot add things like flows that have been created as part of an app or instant flows of an app. Those need to be, you can add the app to the solution, but then you would have to manually recreate the solution to the app. So it's a little bit of an annoyance, but I'm pretty sure that as things go along, Microsoft will continue to refine and remove some of these restrictions, and things will be a lot easier. But now I have my expense application that I just created within a solution, and that's pretty much how you should start your development. Once you have your solution in place, always start adding objects to the solution. Don't wait to add them after the fact. You can then publish all your customizations, and those will actually render those customizations into your Dataverse repository, and now you are able to pretty much go ahead and work with that. So I'm going to go over then to the project that I just created in DevOps, and as you can see, the part that we have to look at is our repos, and we can initialize that repository. So that's the first thing you want to do once you set up your project. And once you initialize your repository, pretty much you get a README file. That's the initial step of that, and we will then proceed to determine all the different contribution aspects of the project. We'll set up our DevOps pipelines. Those are kind of the next mechanics thing that follow this. So I'm going to go into settings here for this particular project. And what I'm interested in looking at is the repositories and some of the permissions under those repositories. This is actually important because if you're going to have a multi-developer environment, which is something that's probably coming down the road with Power Platform, you will want to make sure that these projects are actually set up accordingly. So I want to make sure that my permissions for contributors are enabled, and that's primarily what I'm looking for here. Okay. And also there are some dependencies on contributors, especially when you're moving projects between environments. So that's important to make sure that you allow contribution in your project, in your DevOps project. Okay. All right. The other thing that we're going to do is we're going to continue and verify our service connections. So the importance of service connections is to allow you to initially set up a link between your DevOps environment and certainly your Power Platform environment. So there's a generic service connection, but also there is a MFA, or one that depends on an application user or an application registration. So what we want to do here initially is get the information about our environment, because it's important to know what URL you're going to target. The way that DevOps reaches into your Power Platform environment is through the URL that is associated to your environment itself. So we want to copy that out. We want to paste that into our service URL, okay? And we're going to add the HTTPS prefix to it. Then what you're going to do is enter all the credentials to authenticate to that particular environment, and set up give it the service connection a name. So in this case, I'm just going to call this probably ALM dev, okay? And I can give it a description, but more importantly, you want to grant access to those pipelines. So that's basically going to set up your service connection information. If you go to new service connection, you will want to do one of these for each of the environments that you're going to create. But there's also, if you are in an environment that you have ALM deployed, you will want to set up a service connection that relies on an application ID. And at the end of this, at the tail end of this presentation, I'm going to actually show you how to do that. So right now, all I'm showing you is that there is a different option for those of you who have ALM enabled, or I'm sorry, MFA enabled. So in order to do that, you would go to portal.azure.com. You would select your authenticate into your portal. So as you can see, there are different components to this that require perhaps different levels of security, but I'm going to choose Azure Active Directory here. And what you will want to do if you have a MFA enabled in your environment is create an application registration that's going to allow you then to bridge your Power Platform environment. So I'm going to set up a new registration. In this particular case, you would then set up all the definitions for that application ID. But as I said, it's something that we're going to talk about later on. I'm going to just skip through this, but what I'm going to go back here to is right here. Okay, so for the second part of this demo, we're going to deal with all the pipeline, which is going to basically allow you to then move your source code or your Power Platform solution into a source code repository under Azure DevOps. So for that, we're going to set up a pipeline. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use the classic editor. There isn't necessarily a predefined template, so that's probably the best way to go. And we're just going to make sure that we're using the Azure repos Git. You can use any particular source that suits your particular needs, but Azure repo Git is required for our Power Platform. Now, we could actually select or configure stuff through YAML, but there is no YAML template either. So what we want to do is we want to use the standard classic job setup. So the first thing I'm going to do is then rename my my pipeline, and this is going to be the one that's going to export from development. And then in the agent, what I'm going to do then is I'm going to set up a display name for that particular agent, and I'm going to call this build development pipeline. Sort of good to not have to type. So anyways, the particular aspect here that you want to keep in mind is this allow scripts to access OAuth token, because that's going to give us the ability to then communicate through OAuth to our DevOps application, to our DevOps environment, or I'm sorry, to our Power Platform environment, without having to do any second password entry or something like that. Now, whenever you're actually reading stuff from your Power Platform environment, you always, first and foremost, need to actually get the Power Platform tool installer task in the list of tasks, and that's the first thing that you do. That task basically is going to create or allow our agent to have all the XRM tools that are necessary to bring down information from our Power Platform environment into our DevOps environment. Those tasks, by the way, are actually tasks that are added from the Power Platform build tools. So the next one that I'm going to add here is the export tools, and I'm going to export information out of my Power Platform environment or solution into the DevOps. As I said before, you could actually use a service principal client, and hopefully at the tail end I can show you how to build this. But what you will do then is that service principal client secret is the one that you're going to use from your Azure portal and the application registration you created. So that's very important to keep in mind here. Okay. In environments where there's no MFA support, you don't need to select that. But for now, I'm going to actually select that ALM dev connection for my principal account. The solution name. If you're actually concerned about the solution name, you gotta go back then and look into your environment, into your Power Platform admin environment, and build that from there. So I'm just gonna add a variable because I don't want to have to type that manually all the time. For those of you familiar with the traditional .NET projects or whatever, you know that you can also set up your environment variables that you can use to track stuff and not necessarily have to do it manually. So if I go back to the Power Platform Admin Center and I go to Solutions, the actual name that I want is not the display name. The one that I want is the actual name given to that display name internally by the platform. So that's the ALM solution, and that's what I'm going to set up as the variable name or the variable content or value for that solution name variable that I just set up. And this is actually going to reference just as much as you've done it through the dollar symbol, open parenthesis, and solution name. That's the name of the variable that I'm going to put there. So could I have actually put ALM solutions? Yes, I could have, but since I have to repeat that through several places, I don't necessarily want to do that all the time. Plus, it's best practice just to use variables. Now, the solution output file is the actual zip file that I'm going to download from my platform, from my Power Platform solution. Now, you can select a path, but I don't want to have to hard code that path either. So what I can do is I can use a combination of the global variable that I just set up and an internal system variable that's going to be my build.artifact staging directory. And I can close the parenthesis here and then backslash, and I probably want to just use the solution name and add the extension .zip to that solution name. So keep in mind, if you're doing traditional, what I call traditional manual stuff, you would be downloading your solution from your Power Platform that saves into a zip file. Well, this actually is doing it for you. You only have to tell it what's the name of the zip file. Okay. Now I'm going to add a new task. And the task that we're going to look for here is the Power Platform. Again, we start with Power. And what we want to do is we actually want to unpack that solution. So pretty much I downloaded my zip file. I want to extract all the individual JSON files, XML files, and components of that solution, just so I can have it in manageable individual files. So again, the output that I use in the previous one is probably the input file that I need here. So I'm taking that zip file that I first downloaded, and now I'm going to unpack it into separate individual files. So now I need to specify what folder those files are going to go into. And for that, I'm going to use yet again another system variable. So I'm going to use the build.sources directory. And we can actually create a solution name, add the solution name as part of that subdirectory folder that I'm going to use for unpacking the solution at that point. Okay. Now, key here is to make sure your type of solution is unmanaged, because since we're dealing with the source code or we're dealing with the source files, we probably don't want to make it a managed solution at this point, because we're getting everything into the repo. Remember, that's what we're doing at this point. We're getting everything into a repository. So if we were to choose managed, then we wouldn't have access to any of those files, or it would be all jumbled up if you tried to edit them or look at them or do anything to them. Okay. Now, once we have the type of solution set, we will also want to add a new task, or go ahead at this point, I guess, and save it. But the bottom line here is you can save that pipeline, that build pipeline, to a folder if you want, and that's the default project folder. I'm just going to choose that as an option and just save it from there. And then I'm going to work in another task. And that task, what this task is going to do then is, now that I've downloaded and unpacked the solution, I want to get those files into the repo. So I'm going to use a command line option for that, or a command line task. And there's already a predefined script that is provided by Microsoft. All you have to really do is change what the template options are, and all I'm doing here is adding my particular user to authenticate. Now, some of you might have a service user. Just make sure you're using your service user or service account, whatever you want to use for pushing into your repository. That has to be already configured. It's probably an Active Directory account that you already have authorized for that. You can still use those service accounts to do that. So I'm just going to save this and queue up. And we will go from there. So remember, this first step is getting everything out of my Power Platform environment and moving it into my DevOps repository. Okay, you have the option to, when you run that pipeline, to enable system diagnostics. If this is the first time you're doing it and you're not familiar too well with the procedures, that's what I would recommend. Just go ahead and click save, and then that's going to run my build pipeline. So you can then dive into that a little bit, and you can see some of the tasks being executed. You will have a status for each one of those tasks once they're completed. This, if you've done DevOps before with Azure DevOps, this is no different from any pipeline that you've created at this point. You know, administering the pipeline, looking at the status of the pipeline. If you are a build manager or a release manager, you're probably already familiar with some of these steps anyways. Okay, so we'll let this finish up. We can see that we had a little bit of an error there, and we'll go and clean that up in a bit. But this is all intentional. So I can see, once I'm monitoring, that I have not actually set up or assigned a role to that particular application user that I'm using. So these are things that can present themselves. So what you want to do is you want to go over to the Power Platform Admin Center, and you're going to then go back to environments and choose your your dev environment. And what I want to do is I want to see the settings for the users and their permissions. So I'm just going to click users plus permissions, and then I'm going to select users. This is a little bit of a quirk, because if you're dealing with application users, you really have to click on that Manage Dynamics 365 users. But you know, it is what it is at this point. And I already have a development application user created. So I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to go to Manage Roles. And you want to make sure that that user has the appropriate permissions. So just to make things simple, we'll make it a system admin. But you know, in essence, I think just by having a environment maker, that's just about enough permissions for that application user. Okay. Now, if we go back to pipelines and we rerun that particular pipeline if we want, then we can see that that error will disappear. Okay. So just little quirks that you gotta keep in mind. If you're dealing with application users, make sure you have the proper security roles. Make sure it's properly tied to the application registration you created, and make sure that application registration is properly tied into your DevOps environment. Okay. So again, we're running our pipeline, and now you can see that that task is actually moving forward without any issues. So there we go. All the installer XRM tools are in. Now we're gonna export the solution. See, now keep in mind what we're looking at here is this ALM dev, that crm.dynamics.com. That's the environment that I'm connecting to. And now the next task, once it's there, is actually exporting that solution. And that's just gonna create that zip file that I'm expecting in my artifact directory. So now I'm grabbing that from the directory, and I'm applying that command line script that's then gonna push that those files into my repository. So as a result, I can go to the repository files, and then I can look at my ALM solution. I can see I have my Canvas app files. You know, this is gonna get more and more refined. But if you're doing Git or GitHub, now you have access to the actual source files for your code. But you know, I expect that to make it perhaps into the DevOps stream at some point. I don't see why it wouldn't be done, but you never know. Anyways, that's the initial pipeline. I want to actually do something since I'm driving and controlling here. I want to pause here and ask you guys if you have any questions so far as to what you've seen. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and we'll move forward with this one. Okay, so we're going to set up a new pipeline. And this pipeline now, what it's going to do is it's going to allow me to then move from, you know, from my repository into my test environment. So keep in mind here that what we're trying to do is we're actually trying to build a complete cycle. So this is my QA environment files, and that's going to set up a different agent. So we're going to just go ahead then and add some tasks to this. Remember, the first task is always to get the XRM tools installed. So we're going to use the Power Platform tool installer here. And that requires no extra configuration. Keep in mind that that task is pretty much self-sufficient, self-contained. Then the other thing that we're going to do then is we're going to then add another task. And that task then is going to be, again, if you just like Power, it will get you all the list of tasks that are related to your Power Platform build tools. But I'm going to then pack that solution. So you've gone through your process of you know, loading your repository, having all your files in there. The next thing that we're going to do then is pack that solution, meaning we're going to take that those files, those individual files in the repository, and create a compact zip file again that we can move into our test environment. That's exactly what we're doing here. So again, I'm going to take it from the build.source directory, and we have this solution name variable that we're using because we don't want to have to do that. So all I'm going to do is add it again into this particular pipeline. Remember that variables are pipeline specific. So I'm just going to type ALM solutions here because I know that's what it is. And then I'm going to set up the output file for that, that's going to be the zip file that I'm going to create. So what we want to do for this then is, again, use some of those global system variables. In this case, build that artifact staging directory. That's, again, no different than anything you've done in the past if you've done .NET. The only thing that or .NET projects, I should say, the only thing that we're doing here is adding the solution name and a zip extension to it. Now we're going to go ahead and, again, look for power. And we're going to then push the files to the environment. So what we want to do is use that import solution. And note that there is, I'm going to pause this here for a second. Note that there's an option to build an environment. You can actually create environments from inside of your pipeline. So you don't have to have a predefined environment. Most of you will have a predefined environment, but you can actually set up the environment from scratch using the Power Platform build tools. So again, I'm going to use the service principal account that I associated to my QA environment. So here's my ALM QA connection. And I'm going to point to the solution file. And remember, the output of the previous task is probably always the input for the subsequent task that you have. So I'm just going to go ahead and select that information from my previous task and paste it into my my subsequent task. So that's that. Make sure you have the zip extension, compare, make sure everything is okay. And it's pretty simple, really, to build a pipeline that works that way. Now, what I'm going to do here is I can then save this particular pipeline, queue it up, and then execute it again. So let's give this some chance to catch up. All right, I'm going to advance this. Yep, there we go. So we're going to add, again, one more task. And that task is then going to be to basically export the solution. So we import it back, and now we're going to export it. We're going to select that service principal again, and that's going to be our QA environment. The solution name is the solution name that I'm going to create in that QA environment. So keep in mind that what we want to do here is we want to make sure that we set up our solution. We probably want to use the same one. If you want to use a different solution name going to your QA environment, that's entirely up to you. I particularly like consistency across environments as part of my development practices, just to make sure that we're using, standard practices across the board. Now, in your QA environment, it's up to you whether you want to send that solution over as a managed solution or as an unmanaged solution. Remember that in managed solutions, your team is not going to be able to edit any of the content of the solution that you have. So they're not going to be able to edit the apps or flows or whatever, and then you will then want to publish those artifacts once you're done. So we actually have that published artifact, and that's just going to be straight out of the Azure pipelines. You have the ability to select a file share as well. And since we're using a folder, all we're going to do is point to that particular folder where we selected the build number. So it kind of has that sort of formatting capability. So it all depends if you want to hard code a folder, you just want to actually select the artifact published location. But at this point, I'm going to just queue up and run that pipeline, and you can see what's happening here. All right, so all my job is running. It's checking out stuff from my Power Apps environment, or I should say from my DevOps environment. It's actually installing the tools, packing the solution now. So here we're building that zip file. We're gonna import that solution. So we're gonna basically set up some tools here. Notice that this is actually going to the ALM QA CRM.dynamics environment. And finally, what we're doing then is we're publishing the artifacts that are in that particular folder. So now what you can do is you can go to your environment. You can go to make.powerapps.com. You will want to then select your QA environment, which is where you are. And note that now I have my ALM solution in that environment. So I can then publish all my customizations. And once I'm done, don't forget to share your solutions again, or don't forget to share your apps with your QA folks or your release managers or whomever you have in that stage. But the bottom line is they will not be able to access those customizations unless you have shared that particular solution with them. Okay, so there we go. And that, in essence, is a complete step for that. So now the next thing is, if you are a release manager, now you want to set up a release pipeline. Okay, this is slightly different than what you've done before. So here you want to set up a stage for your production. So let's say you're happy now with your QA process and everything went well. You're going to set up a stage where you're going to actually build up your production environment. Now the project, that's going to be the project that you're working on. And the source for that build pipeline is going to be what's in QA, because let's assume that QA already approved the push that you did previously. Okay. Then we can actually use a source alias. You can change that if you want, but I typically use simply the word build. That's going to be easy to identify. And you're then going to go ahead and see that, click on that production option, then you can add tasks that will move the data out now. So I'm just going to click on the plus sign for that agent. Again, look for power, and that's going to filter all my tasks. I'm going to add the installer to that. And the next thing that I'm going to do then is set up the task that's going to be able to then push or actually create that release pipeline or that release option for me. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm already there on Power. I'm going to import the solution. So that specifically is asking me for a service connection. Remember, this part will be the service connection now to your production environment. So you can then click from that drop down, and that solution input file then will be the previous solution file that we selected from our previous operation. So when we move from QA, we're going to use the output of those solution files. So in that case, that was my managed zip file. Now, some of you might say, well, what happens if I have several iterations of QA and pushes to QA and until something is ready? Well, at that point, you choose the latest one, the latest build that you sent out. So that's no different than any project that you've done in the past. Now, again, I'm actually setting up my solution name, and the scope of that will be release. I can go ahead and save and choose the folder by default, hit OK. You can see that the default folder is the AL pipelines folder, but you can choose that one specifically from there. Okay. Now, once I'm done here, I will then go ahead and create the release. Then you basically are asking, what are the stages for trigger changes, etc. You have the opportunity to set your version. That version is going to come from the actual pipelines that you've built in the past. So now we have one release created. And the next thing here then is we're going to go ahead and create the release option, and just click on release, and that's now in the process of building that release out to my pipeline, to my production environment. So the first thing again is the Power Platform Tools installer. That's the first thing that gets created. If you can see, it's now actually deploying everything into your production environment. And then it's gonna show you the commits, and if you can walk through the work items, everything that's being done, there is the opportunity to do that. All right. I don't know that this process is any different, again, from anything that you do, say, in the .NET world or in the web services world or anything like that. So that certainly is a process that takes some time. So you will want to make sure that you arm up yourself with some coffee. I'll speed up some things here. And again, we can see why that failed. It probably failed because I have a user set with the incorrect role. So again, go back to your application ID in your environment, your application user, make sure you have the proper roles for moving stuff between productions. I intentionally did this when I was practicing, because I wanted to make sure it serves as a reminder that don't assume that application users or any artifact that you set up has the adequate permissions out of the box. You have to make sure that you are always checking and assigning the proper permissions to the different elements that you're working with. So in this case, I have a production user. I'm just going to go ahead then and manage the roles associated to that account. Again, for all intents and purposes and for simplicity, I'm using system admin, but you don't have to use those roles. Use what's appropriate for the levels of security that you're looking for. I can then go ahead and redeploy this or retry it, and at that point, everything should work just fine. Now, there are other things that I can talk about here, but this is the essence of DevOps with Power Platform ALM. There are certainly other considerations for you to keep in mind, like, for example, how you're going to do things like lock in resources when you are actually in the middle of development. Those are things that you have to pretty much decide what sort of strategy you're going to implement. They're not entirely clear, and there's no guiding principles in doing that. So whatever practice you're familiar with, I suggest you start looking into those. But here's the final expense application. Note that that application was actually a managed solution. So you get a notice about that. You can then publish those customizations. And now I can go and look into my solution specifically. I gotta obviously share that particular solution and its interest with different individuals within the organization. But up to that point, this is the full cycle that you would basically go through with solutions and moving things between environments, moving things between different, or creating the different pipelines in Azure DevOps, both your build pipeline and your release pipeline. And then here's my expense application again. I would just go ahead and share that, choose who I want to share it with. This is one that actually bit me, because remember that these are being published by your application user ID. So when you set those up in production, there is actually no specific sharing done up to that point. So you then gotta go and share that application. But all in all, this is what I had for you guys today. I am really sorry about the inconveniences that we had, and hope you at least got the overall gist of this whole thing. And if you have any questions, again, please reach out to me. You can always go to my YouTube channel. I'm constantly publishing videos on, especially on ALM, since it's one of the topics that drives my interest. And feel free to follow me on Twitter as well, or anywhere you feel like like doing so. I'm also on LinkedIn, so if you just go and type Mariano Gomez, you'll probably find my profile there. Feel free to add me as your contact, and thank you very much for participating.
Wow, Mariano, you did it. That you covered everything in the deployment pipelines, everything, and far more than I've seen in the past. So everything from security permissions in Azure DevOps to the practices around solution conventions, around variables, using variables properly for deployments, and then you set up the end-to-end pipelines from the different environments. So you covered everything. So number one, huge round of applause, Mariano. That's all I can say, but I wouldn't expect anything less from a 13-time Microsoft MVP. So I just want to say well done, congrats, really, and also thanks to everyone for the moral support. I guess we had Audrey and Prashant and Victor. So yeah, so great, and Carsten as well. So as you can see in the chat window, I know we're finished now for the event, and I think that the questions that were asked in the chat window have been answered anyway. But feel free to take a look at that, Mariano. But I do feel the questions have been answered, mainly around Power Automate. Yes, so I think they've all been answered anyway, to be honest, looking at the answers there. Yes, so I think everyone's aware that Power Automate is solution aware. I think there was a question on SharePoint and variables, but again, feel free to reach out to Mariano. Because things do get a bit more complex when it comes to SharePoint and other moving parts with ALM.
As I said, this is an evolving, think of ALM a little bit of the neglected child. It's kind of like we had the platform and then all this ALM stuff came later on. But what I actually commend the folks over at Microsoft is their commitment to actually build out this platform the right way. Even if we don't see things that are the traditional elements that we used to. I mean, there's always a way to work around the different things that you don't see. I feel that this is going to go even further. I invite everybody to start looking into the source code components that they release for Git. That's something that I really hoping myself to learn enough about and move forward with that. There's different tools, different flavors of doing things, and that's what makes this whole thing interesting. There's not one way of doing things. So definitely, if nothing else you learn from this session, solutions are your friends, especially when doing ALM and with Power Platform.
And there's lots of positive feedback, as you can see from Audrey. Really happy to have you on today. It's been such a pleasure, and everyone else really, Dave and Marcus, Ricardo, Coquelin, Carsten, Cheryl, just giving lots of positive feedback that they really benefited from this, and it was a really great session. So again, what a great way to end the second day, really. So I just want to thank you again, Mariano.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Thank you for your support. I know we had a little bit of hiccups at the front, but I definitely had planned to do this live. Unfortunately, I had some issues in my own environment. I think my IT team deployed a whole bunch of changes last night, and certainly something went haywire. So fortunately enough, I had my practice run recording, and that was good enough for me to do and move forward today. But I appreciate everyone's support and understanding, and definitely looking forward to do some more with you guys.
And I'm sharing your Twitter on in the chat. Feel free to share your blog as well, Mariano, and your YouTube channel. I'm sure many people want to reach out to you.
I already provided an entry to my YouTube.
Yes, you have. Yes, great stuff. Well, thanks again, Mariano, for that great finale for today. And thank you to all the attendees. Thank you to all the speakers today. And yes, so tomorrow